August day. It's meant to be getting up to sort of 34, 35 degrees today. Not particularly pleasant in a machine with no aircon. Not particularly pleasant to work in regardless, to be honest, but it's Friday, so we'll be in the pub in a few hours time, and that'll be quite a nice place to enjoy the weather. But for now, I just wanted to talk through this new bucket I've got, which I had made for me by Hurricane Attachments. Aiden, who sort of CPS plant and now has Hurricane Attachments on the side of that business. We've spoken for a long time. He's a rotor-tilt dealer and over in Northern Ireland, and met him at shows and things, and yeah, mainly through a plant forum that I'm part of on the internet, which actually is how I kind of met a lot of people and gained ideas and things that I've since taken forward in my business. Anyway, I was on the lookout for, and I'd seen Steel Wrist had done them, a kind of tapered bucket for my tilt rotator, with a kind of idea, the concept of trying to save materials, really. Materials and excavation time, that's always what I'm about. Of course, with fuel being where it is these days as well, the price of fuel, if it can save a little bit of that, then that's an advantage as well. But let's face it, in a small machine like this, you know, a 2-3% saving is not exactly going to set the world on fire. However, of course, same principles apply, right, to you guys with bigger machines. So a bit of fuel saving is no bad thing for anyone. You will just notice the saving a lot more than I would. But anyway, the main thing for me was shingle saving, really. I do a lot of land drainage, and I do a fair bit of, like in this instance here, a bit of storm drainage. Just fitting some gullies in down this existing track. We're going to curb and curbing each side of it, tarmacking it, so it needs drainage, right? So that's what I'm installing at the moment. Really simple little system. There's no design, you know. I've sort of come up with a design for the client, try and do a bit of value engineering of it, and this all runs down to soak away in the far corner concrete rings that I've put in last week. Anyway, the discussion, I had a discussion on Twitter actually about these buckets. Someone had one of the Steel Wrist ones, and I know Steel Wrist, I think it's Steel Wrist, you can actually go online now and in theory make your own bucket or design your own bucket. They don't do it in S30 yet, which is a bit of a shame, but otherwise you can literally with a CAD drawing pull the shape of the bucket around and make something, you know, different. Spec what width you want it here, what width you want between the ears, all that sort of thing, which is really cool. And I have had a play, and sort of it gives you your volume, what volume that bucket would be, what weight it would be anticipated to be, and then you can actually sort of basically order that bucket that you've designed, you know, with teeth, without teeth, whatever you want. So a pretty cool system, and it got me thinking about trying to make an improvement on the sort of traditional sort of tapered sort of tile drain bucket, but one for a tilt rotator, in a smaller size, similar to the Steel Wrist one, but on S30, which they don't do. So thinking is save time, less excavation, save diesel, because you're putting less effort in the ground, potentially less, you know, less cycles that you're doing, and also mainly save on aggregate, which isn't getting any cheaper, is it? Haulage is getting expensive, aggregate's not getting any cheaper to get out of the ground or out of the sea or wherever it comes from. So little small improvements, but that's, as you may have gathered from my channel, small improvements is where I'm about. Always trying to maximise my, you know, my business and money and the profits, right? So traditionally I'd have dug a 4-inch drain like this with a 300mm bucket. That's the one that came with this set. It's quite a common size in the UK, you know, foot bucket. That's sort of your general narrow bucket in a machine like this. Now you can get a 9-inch bucket, and I do have a 9-inch bucket for my stuff. They're not often light because they're when you have a tilt rotator is that the bucket is a lot narrower than the unit itself. So when you get down over the depth of the bucket, you end up just hammering the sides of the tilt rotator into the ground and digging with the sides of the unit, which it's not ideal, right? It does happen, it's not ideal. So anyway, my concept was, well, the 300mm's got great width because you can just about see on the camera, but the unit will fit and pretty much just scrape down the sides of a 300mm trench, really. I've done it lots in a 300mm trench to get the depth needed for water mains and things, and to be honest, it's absolutely fine. You scrape a little bit of paint off on the side, but it's not actually damaging anything, you know. The ram won't quite go in, but the rest of it will. So the whole sort of point was create a bucket that's 300mm wide at the top and maybe a little bit narrower at the bottom. In this instance, I've gone for 150mm. That's my that was my guess, really. I had to take a guess on these things, don't you? I'm trying something out, I take a guess. And so anyway, Aiden is a guy who can make a bucket. He's made several attachments for other friends of mine, and I think you know, he knows tilt rotators. He understands the shape that they want to be, because I love that long toe. You see here, I've got material on the toe of the bucket. There's actually none in the back of it, but that's not a problem. You know, we're almost sort of using it like a tongue, really, to get in. It's excellent for working around surfaces or getting into a corner or something. You know, if I was digging next to this curb or something, you know, I can just use the edge of the bucket. And I really like the shape. You get a nice flat back on it. It curls up nicely when you're up round here. You know, it tilts well. If you ever used a standard bucket on a tilt rotator, you'll understand what I mean. Standard buckets work very well when they're working in one direction like this, but they don't really work with the angles. And what Aiden's done here is create, a very nice shaped bucket that works very well with a tilt rotator. So it's been ideal, really, and I'm just I've used it a little bit. This is the first job it's been on, but I've done a few trenches already. I allowed, for this drainage here, I allowed 10 tonne of material because I had about 70 metres of trench to do, and you know, 300mm deep. It needs 10 tonne of material, right? So I think this bucket so far has almost halved, if not more, my shingle usage. But I'm going to prove that, and I've dug a section of trench up there with my 300mm bucket over a 6 metre length of pipe, and we're going to count how many buckets of shingle it takes to put in that. And then I've obviously dug this bit round here that's at the much narrower, with the much narrower bucket than you tapered bucket. And okay, this trench hasn't dug exceptionally well because the top bit of it is all crushed. The ground is absolutely rock hard at the moment. It's so dry, so it's kind of crumbling away, and we haven't got that perfect V. But the bit in the clay is a nice sort of tapered shape. And we're going to see how many buckets it takes compared, you know, to the two. So that'll give us a pretty rough idea, but that'll scale obviously over the course of you know, 50, 100 metres, however many you're doing of drainage, as to see if this actually is saving. And of course, it's got to earn its money back, because we don't buy attachments for looking pretty. They've got to earn their money, and that's the idea. So stick with me. I'll get the rest of this trench just dug out here to the corner. This is going to be my last gully position here. It's the low point, and I'll come back to you when we're doing a bit of backfilling. So I've just dug a little bit of trench. You've got the original 300 bit here, and then it gets a bit narrower. I think it's a bit easier to see from the other end. Kind of what we're saving. I mean, obviously the top is sort of breaking away on the edges, so it's not getting a nice, like the cleanest V shape, but essentially it's quite a saving over the over just using the 300 bucket, and that can be seen here in the spoil. You know, look at the spoil I've got here compared to what I've got over here. 50%. I think you could probably argue it's 50%. don't know what the calculator would say if I actually worked out volumes of buckets, etc. Being dug, but yeah, I mean, it's half the pile, isn't it? So we're excavating half the amount, which in theory, I mean, the ground is absolutely hard as balls. We're having to use the ripper, as you've seen, but you've got to be using less fuel, taking half the material out, right? And in theory, half the time, although maybe not in good ground. You know, the 300 bucket would pull out more material, but you have got to be using less fuel to do that, I'd have thought, because you're putting more force through that little jaw, aren't you, on there? So maybe not the best ground and the best time of year to show that in, but I'm fairly confident on a long trench run those small savings would add up for sure. The bucket itself is a really nice shape. I'm really pleased with what he's done here. I kind of had this sort of thing in my head. I've seen them on bigger machines. I think Steel Wrist, for example, make a tapered bucket very similar to this, and I wanted to really copy that design I've got on the sort of cable bucket, as they're known for Engcon. But it's a lovely shape. I love the long toe on it is really good. It just works really well under the tilt rotator, and I kind of wanted that, but in this kind of tile bucket, as they're sort of known as, shape. It's got that nice long toe on it, and it's nice and light as well. It's been well done with some thicker material on the cutting edges, where it's just exactly, you know, where you want it. Cheeks of the bucket, down on the cutting edge, but not too much in other places, you know, the back of the bucket where it doesn't need it so much. So I haven't weighed it yet, but you can pick it up and move it about, which is good. It's yeah, certainly no heavier than the Engcon 300 bucket, and I have had some made before that have been just overall made out of a thicker material, and they just get a bit too heavy, really. And you're always trying to save weight on these things, transport and just being under the tilt rotator generally on a smaller machine. So to confirm this experiment, I've got a length of drainage here, 6 metres long, in 300mm trench, which is what I traditionally dig for this kind of work. And I'm going to see how many buckets it takes to fill this, so that way when I'm digging the next length of 6 metres, I can compare number of buckets taken to backfill and see if we're actually saving any shingle or not. Now, I mean, of course technically it has to, right? In fact, it's doing two things. You're saving the amount of dirt that you're digging out, and you're saving shingle and backfill material back in. So it actually should save, you know, on sort of 2 levels. And for those thinking, well, it's all very well, Ollie, but you know, how are you getting your falls, how are you getting, you know, you're not bending your pipe. Obviously we will get out and chop this in. It is only storm water, so it's not on a exact set fall, you know. We're just looking to get the water to run essentially down the hill to the soakaway. I'm using a 20mm stone because that's multi-purpose. I'm using it to neaten up a few areas. That bucket is 3 there. I think it'll take 4 buckets to backfill a length of this at 300. Interesting to see what we save. buckets, and we were doing it at 300mm wide. We're now essentially at 150 wide, so it would make sense to use half the amount, right? We will see. The only thing I would say, horrible noise that, isn't it? Getting out the dumper. Try and make sure I've got a fair bucket size. The only thing I would say is the trench it makes. I probably should have, for 4-inch drainage, I think it really wants to be 200mm wide, because you just struggle, and okay, 20mm shingle definitely doesn't help, but there's other reasons I'm using that. Yeah, so there you go, that's the end of that bit of drainage. I mean, that's 1.5 buckets, isn't it, really? Even if you were generous. But yeah, I think I would probably have it a little bit wider for 4-inch pipe work, just so you can get the stones round the sides of the pipe a little bit better. Yeah, I just think that would probably make it a little bit easier. Make sure the pipe's got a bit of bedding. It's doable with this, but you know, you've got 25mm either side of the pipe, and it's just not quite enough room. And if I'm honest, when you're like piecing up the pipe, it's just that little bit tight to stand in. I think 200mm bottom, 300mm top would be the perfect pipe, really. The perfect bucket. Stick the rest of that in there. We can go and piece it in. Yeah, so 150mm, I think that will work really well for drainage, land drainage, that kind of thing. Where you've got like an 80mm land drain, something like that. I think it'll work really, really well for that. You get a decent amount of stone around the edges, but it's a bit tight, a little bit tight for the 100mm pipe work. But workable, you know. If it was foul, I'd probably use a wider bucket, because you need to make sure it's the right level, don't you? That's the point. So yeah, so that's my review, not really a review, it's an experiment. I always try and change things around, look to improve on what I can do, and kind of, you know, show the people who are interested. I'm amazed there's a few of you who are, trench because the 450 width will allow the tilt rotator in, but you narrow it down to 300. I think that would be a pretty tasty weapon as well. Anyway, I've always got thoughts of buckets and stuff I want to make. Never have too many attachments until you come to move them all off the job, and then you realise you've got way too many attachments. That's the joys of owner operating. Never going to pick that route up. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that was informative for you. A bit of an experiment on my part. Yeah, cost a few £100, but I think it will definitely save a bit of aggregate, and that's not getting any cheaper, is it? £35 a ton, £30 a ton if you buy it, maybe in 8-wheeler loads. And either way, you're not, you know, a ton. It's going to save you quite a bit of money quite quickly if you can halve your shingle use simply by you know, using another bucket